Managing a project budget can feel terrifying. Trust me, I know. I've managed multi-million-dollar project budgets. I've also managed really small budgets. No matter what, it feels like a ton of pressure. In this video, we're going to break down step by step, kind of unravel this daunting task into step-by-step processes that you can take while managing projects. So whether you're managing that multi-million-dollar project budget or that $500 project budget, you feel empowered and confident to take on the task. My name is Erica. I am a project management consultant, an entrepreneur, and small business owner. I run a small project management consulting firm, and we work on these projects every day. I've managed budgets where we've gone over, where we've come way under, and more often than not, where we deliver exactly within budget. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through a lot of what I've learned. A lot of what I've learned as a certified project management professional, and how I approach managing these projects and make it feel a little bit less scary for myself so I can sleep better at night. So this is going to be like the theme of all of my project management education videos. Before you can even get a budget together, you need a scope. A project without a scope is a disaster waiting to happen for both you, the client, and the stakeholders. The scope should be a very detailed, well-defined set of deliverables, expectations, quality metrics that the project needs to deliver on. The reason this is so important is because the primary culprit of budget overruns is scope creep. And a scope statement, a very clear, well-defined scope, helps eliminate the risk of scope creep. So think of it this way, your budget, it's like a grocery list, right? And if you go in and you start buying a really fancy steak and top shelf wine, all of a sudden you've completely blown your grocery budget that you came in with, and maybe you don't have enough to pay for it at the end, or all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I spent $150 at the grocery store when I only intended to spend $50. That is never a good feeling, and somebody's probably gonna be unhappy about that. All right, so let's say you get your scope statement together. So now it's time to create a detailed budget plan. You wanna do this early, so do it before the project work begins, after the scope statement is defined, and before project work begins. And we're gonna go through the types of costs, and you're gonna work with your SMEs or your subject matter experts on how to define and estimate these. So I'm gonna read through the different types of costs right now. The first one is a variable cost. So this is something that changes as the project progresses. So this could be something like gas prices. If your project is an on-site project and people need to go to and from the site and you're gonna be expensing their gas, that needs to be built into your budget, and that would be a variable cost because gas prices fluctuate every single day. On the other side of that, there's fixed costs. So that's anything that will have no fluctuation as the project goes. That could be something like a monthly software subscription package that you purchase. So then there are direct costs. So this is a cost that the project will directly incur. So it's something that you've kind of already built into your budget. And this would be something like your project team's hourly wage. There's also indirect costs. So this is anything that is not built into the budget, but something that you will incur as the project goes on. So if you are going to need to be printing a ton of documentation for in-person meetings, you might have the indirect cost of needing to buy more paper for your printer. That's an example of one that can sneak up on people. And then finally, there's sunk cost, and that's money that's already been spent on the project. So you kind of need to have an idea of all of those as you're going through. And then you're going to get into cost estimation. So for this, you're going to need your scope statement, your project schedule, your risk register, your resource requirements, any organizational process information, and then any environmental factors that might play into your project or impact the budget in any way. And again, it's not just a one-person job to map these out. Rely on your SMEs, rely on your stakeholders to kind of speak up here. So methods for estimating cost. I did talk about this a lot in my previous video. We talked about setting realistic timelines for projects, and a lot of those estimation tactics also play into the budget. So that's things like expert judgment, your SMEs telling you how much it's going to cost. I can never say this word, analogous estimating, which is basing your estimations on previous projects. Parametric estimating, which is more of a math equation where you're typically multiplying or dividing something. The easiest example to give is if you're painting square footage and it costs $2 to paint 1 square foot, and you have to paint 500 square feet, then it would cost you $1,000 to paint 500 square feet at $2 $2 a square foot. The other one is bottom-up estimating. This is the most accurate. This is where you would look at, so if you have a WBS or a work breakdown system, you would have your deliverables, and then all of your deliverables would have work packages that would have individual tasks. And you would estimate the time or the cost for each individual task, each individual work package, and roll that up into the deliverable. It takes a lot of time, but it's very accurate. You can also use PERT, Google PERT formula for estimating. I'm not going to get into it because that would be a whole video in itself. There is data analysis. So this is most commonly shows up as reserve analysis, which is where you build extra dollars into the budget to cover your potential risks. And then there's the cost of quality. So this would be any additional budget that you want to add to do things like buying higher quality software, higher quality materials, or more skilled workers to be on your project team. Okay, so those are methods. And then it's time to determine the budget. So ways you can determine the budget, there's cost aggregation, which we kind of talked about with bottom-up estimating. It's where you take all of your line items for all of your tasks underneath the work package and you add those up, you roll them up into the work package, you take a look at the work package, think about all of your different types of costs, variable, fixed, direct, indirect, sunk, and then you roll that up into your deliverable. So that's cost aggregation. There's also expert judgment. So again, you lean on your SMEs there to tell you how much things will cost. There's historical information review. So you can look at how much this thing has cost other projects in the past, if you have those available to you. And then there's also financing. And this is where you go and you acquire money from an external source. And this really depends on what your industry is, because that external source is typically an investor or the public or the government. So like nonprofit projects I work with, we do financing through the public, through fundraisers and donations and sponsorships of that source. So that's an example of all of the different ways that you can determine the budget and kind of figure out how much you need and where you're going to get it from. So then the next thing is tracking it so now the project's starting, and now it's like making sure that you're not going to go over or you're not going to come under. And I'm going to put a screenshot on the screen of a free template you can download from Smartsheet where you're tracking actuals against budget. The baseline here is you can't measure what you don't, or you can't manage what you don't measure. So tracking them in a project management tool is ideal. Tracking it in that free Smartsheet is great. And the key here is tracking your budget against what you're actually spending so you can start tracking those red flags. And as a project manager, I do this twice a week. It really depends on how fast your project's moving, and two, how much money is involved. Because if you have a $500 budget for 3 months, your budget should be moving slower. You know, you should not be incurring like thousands of dollars a week, right, on 500. But if you have $1 million budget, you're going through like tens of thousands of dollars a week. So on those types of projects, it's twice a week where I'm checking in, updating my budgets versus my actuals, flagging anything that is starting to get close as a risk, trying to spot risks early in advance. I have a video on risk on this channel. Go check it out. Very important for project managers. But if you have a lower, then you can probably get away with just a weekly check-in. And we're going to get into communicating that to stakeholders in a second here. But I think of it as like checking my bank account. If you don't monitor those transactions, then one day you're going to be like, where the heck did all of this money go? How am I negative? Or like, how am I almost to zero? So keep a close eye as the project manager. That usually falls into your realm of authority. And there are so many different tools that you can use to track it and automate that for you. So you don't have to do the math, because I'm a project manager, but I am not a math girly. So I fully rely on tools to do the math for me. Okay, the final thing is to communicate these budget updates with stakeholders. So keeping stakeholders in the loop is crucial. And I will give you an example of one where it went badly and one where it went very well, because I handled it two different ways. So when I was a bit more junior, as you become a project manager, you're gonna learn how to spot risk earlier and how to deal with it earlier. And when I was a very junior project manager, I remember being just very confused and overwhelmed by the budget. And I was like, wow, that really looks like it's getting close, but like, I don't think I understand it. And I didn't want to seem dumb to the PM above me. So I didn't say anything. And we ended up overrunning the budget the next week. And we were all like, how the heck did this happen? And it had just been incorrectly estimated. And that happens. And that's something that a project manager should catalog as a risk, is that, like budget overruns can happen because, maybe we don't feel 100% clear about what we've budgeted here. And, stakeholders were not happy because nobody likes an unexpected bill, especially when it's thousands of dollars more. That is when the PM gets in trouble. On the other side, I was on a project just last fall, and I came into the project, I didn't kick it off. I came in halfway through, and I remember being like, whoa, we are already like right there, and we are like the milestone we're reaching is nowhere, we're not close. And I brought it up to my superior, and I was like, hey, like, is this correct? Like, is there somewhere else I should be pulling the budget from? And he was like, yep, that's correct. And so we had a conversation about like, okay, let's readjust our resources. Let's, like, are we experiencing scope creep? Where can we push back on the client? And then on top of that, we need to have a conversation with the client and just level with them and be like, hey, we need more money. You're going to have to, like, we got to figure something out here. And we did. And it was all a great conversation. I got a great review from that client. The project was delivered. We did go over the budget that they had set in the beginning, but since we spotted those flags, this was like 2 months before the client actually needed to give us the money to continue the project work. Basically, a bunch of scope had been added, and that scope hadn't been scoped correctly. They kind of just added an enhancement to the project without sitting down and doing the proper estimation techniques. So it ended up taking the team 2 months longer than what was planned. And so we had 2 extra months of costs. And then on top of that, all of the risk that comes with an enhancement. And we bumped into a lot of different risks. And there was turnover with the project manager because, like I said, I didn't start. Their PM quit halfway through. I started. That is naturally a major risk for the project. But all of the stakeholders were totally okay with what happened because they had ample time. We provided them with a detailed explanation of what happened, where things went wrong, and a very detailed solution. And then also numbers of like, hey, here's best case scenario, worst case scenario, here's where we want to be. And then we had some of that. I talked about reserve analysis. We had extra money built in just because of that enhancement. I knew with enhancement, there is an automatic risk that there are going to be unforeseen things that come along the way. And so we did deliver within that final budget that we recommended. So of course, everybody was happy because we communicated. Communicate early, communicate often, make sure, don't feel embarrassed, don't feel dumb if you're gonna go over budget, because that never only falls on the project manager's shoulders because of everything we went over in this video. There's so much that goes into budget. It is your job to drive the ship, and it is your job to flag things when you notice that they're going wrong. So have eyes on the budget, understand actuals versus budget. There's a lot more could go into here, like all of the different formulas and calculations, but that is very nuanced, and I don't think that my viewership will benefit from that. So yeah, these are just some high-level tips on how to track your budget step by step to deliver more projects within budget and on time. So if you are still feeling very daunted by this and you have large projects, do not hesitate. My email is in the description of this video. Reach out to me and my team. This is what we do. This is how we approach things. We can talk through it. If you're finding yourself going over a lot on projects or coming under a lot on projects, I would also love to talk to you. You don't have to hire me. We could just have an open, candid conversation about why that's happening. Maybe you'll take the tips from the videos. Maybe the videos are a little bit like I'm not speaking the right language to you, and we need to just have a one-on-one about what's going on, and I can give you some tips. You can go try that for a few months. And if it doesn't work, you can come back and maybe work with me. So yeah, there's always that option open if you're just feeling really overwhelmed by this information. But I hope I broke it down in a way that helps you or your team. Thank you so much. Bye.